one of the main benefits that I've experienced with the ADHD medication, and the one I'm taking is Elvanse, also known as Vyanse elsewhere, or lisdexamfetamine, is that when there's lots to be done, instead of either being stuck in some form of decision paralysis, being completely overwhelmed, or just procrastinating over it, I become more of a doer. And I find as well that I don't necessarily start multiple different tasks and jump around them. I'm a lot more focused on a task at hand. Or if it is a case of doing a couple of tasks, it's because that they're linked together. So they sort of work in tandem, and that's why I can stay on point. And I also have a couple of little techniques of things that help me out as well. For example, I find that if I actually give myself a distraction, I'm more focused. And that might seem weird, but obviously if you take regular breaks or something like that, it gives you that moment away from the job and allows you to refocus. And what I find works well for me is either interacting with people on social media, discussions of logic, beliefs, and things like that. Or it could be a case of writing an article or a script for another video, and that can help me stay engaged. It might just be I quickly look at my phone, see if there's any notifications. If there aren't, I get back on with it. If I get an idea, I might write a line, I might write a paragraph, I might write 2 paragraphs, but I do that and I go, right, yeah. And then whilst I'm carrying on with the task at hand, I think about what I could be saying next, what needs to go into the script or the article or anything like that. And that helps me stay on point because whilst I'm doing the job I don't enjoy, I'm thinking about something I do, and I get that sort of intermittent reward of being able to do a little bit towards that thing I enjoy as well. Some people might say that surely the job actually takes you a little bit longer if you're constantly taking these little breaks and time away from it rather than just focusing on the job. And that would ring true if I found it easy to just focus on the job. The problem is, if I'm just trying to do one job and I've got nothing that I enjoy going on, I will get distracted to other jobs. I will find basically, not intentionally, but my brain will wander onto so many different things that I end up not doing the thing or starting loads of different jobs. So yes, if you can stay focused on one task at a time, then yes, it is quicker to not have those things in between. But for me, it's better to have those. The one downside to this methodology, though, is that because my attention is so fully engaged on what I'm doing, it's nowhere else. So I will be doing the job, and I will be thinking about the article or writing a little bit of the article and back and forth, and everything is like all the way up there. I'm like, my brain is fully taken up with these tasks. And that means that I won't provide any attention to my wife or my kids during this time. I might not hear them if they're talking to me. I'm fully focused on what I'm doing. So it can come across as a little bit unfair to them. And that sort of is, is the priority of the job. Does this need to get done right now? Does it need to be done quickly? Is there something I need to do for them ahead of this? So it's a bit of a balancing act. It is probably better to have a schedule with lots of little jobs. And if you can stick to that throughout the week and you just do a couple on this day, a couple on that day, it does work so much better. And there are times in my past where I've had these lists and rotas and targets and broken every job down into smaller bits that I ticked off each time and got that little reward in between and all of that. And that was very, very effective. However, life at the moment is very busy and hectic, and we're struggling to stay on top of things during the week. So it means that things pile up for the weekend. So, for example, yesterday I got up, had a couple of coffees, and then I washed all the stuff that the dishwasher failed to do. There were also mounds of washing from the previous night's dinner because we hadn't washed that, but we were knackered. So there were all the things that don't fit in the dishwasher anyway. There are all the frying pans and dishes and all of that sort of thing. I completely cleaned all the hobs and wiped all of that down, obviously cleaned the sides. I defrosted and cleaned out the freezer and the fridge. I also got some little Tupperware boxes and repacked a lot of the stuff that was loose in the freezer and made it all nice and neat so it was easier to organize and see what was in there and get stuff. And, did the usual emptying of the bins and things like that. And that was sort of by 4 o'clock, all of that was done. And I'd spent my entire day focused on the kitchen, basically, and doing some of the deep clean jobs that we don't get as much time to do. And in fact, it was a whole day of doing things other than stopping for the odd toilet break. And I didn't eat the entire day either. I wasn't hungry. I mean, that is one of the things that I do find sometimes with Elvanse. I'm either not hungry or I'm massively, massively hungry. And I try and listen to my body anyway when I'm working out and doing things like that, which I'm not at the moment due to injury. But it's one of the things, like, if I wake up hungry, I will make myself eat. And if I'm not hungry, I'll listen to my body. I don't see the point in forcing yourself to eat. So the downside of a full day of doing stuff like that is it will usually completely drain my want to do anything else, especially things like socializing. But, things that I really enjoy, like doing the video editing or articles or anything like that, it gets to the evening and I think, oh, I really can't be bothered to do any of that. I just want to zone out, if you will. And obviously, this is another reason why it's good to break things down into small parts, because you don't drain your battery anywhere near as much. We also have a very demanding, almost 3-year-old, and I think that she demonstrates quite strong ADHD traits, if you will. I think that there is something going on there. She's very bright. She's very articulate. She was very advanced with a lot of the things that she was doing. She was walking at 9 months and she's been talking very early and everything like that. So, but it's her behaviors seem to make me think of a lot of the things that I have seen and remember about my own childhood. And when I've looked into some of the childhood developmental ADHD stuff, it does seem to ring true, but it's too early to check. Now, she doesn't let us or her sister, who's only one, get much sleep. And every time that we get her into a good sleep routine, she ends up getting ill or something like that, which then means she's obviously feeling sorry for herself. She wakes up a lot in the night. She wants comforting, which means we're disturbed. Ella's disturbed. And then she's out of the habit. Her and Ella are in bad habits of sleeping again. They're both waking up all the night, even though they're not better. And we finally get them a little bit better. And the cycle continues, and this is one of the things that happens with kids. You just have to accept it. But it does mean that the wife and I are permanently exhausted at the moment, and Ivy is also a bit of a whirlwind, and by that I mean, like, she just causes so much mess, like an unbelievable amount of mess. We know that it's her because there's been a couple of times, and only a couple, unfortunately, where she's been out for the day and no mess has actually been made in the house. Like, it's crazy how much more. But we can completely clean everything up at night, and in the morning, like, if the wife gets up with the kids first and then I get dressed and come out, already the lounge is destroyed, and we're just like, how do you do it this quickly? So whilst I am, at work all day, my wife is essentially fighting fires. And with the mess, basically, it's, the second she sorts out something, another one pops up, and she doesn't have much time. With her being so demanding and wanting so much of her attention and making so much mess, she doesn't actually have much time to do some of the other jobs that she would if she was a quieter child, if she was one that amused her own self a little bit better. And not to mention, my wife takes them to all the different play groups and things like that. So they're out for half the day and then they're back, and then, meal times and so on and so forth. And then it gets to dinner, which I usually cook. My wife does sometimes. And then I do the bath time and bedtime routine. Ivy likes me reading the stories, and, sometimes I might have the bath with them, or sometimes I'll just clean them in the bath. That sort of whole thing is taken up. And she is going to sleep a lot better now at night, like reading her a few stories and she falls asleep. But I'm also so knackered by that time in the day that I quite often fall asleep in her bed reading to her. And I think that's because of two things. The exhaustion, as I mentioned, but I also think that the Elvanse, even though it's supposed to have a half-life of, I think it's 14 hours, I find that it sort of wears off usually 8 to 10 hours. And when I'm getting up early and taking it pretty much as I get up so that it works by the time I start work, by the time it's story time, we're already at the 10 to 12 hour mark anyway. And I'm just, whew. The other annoying thing is the fact that I have this power nap means that I find it harder to actually get to sleep later on as well. I can't seem to win. And not to mention, a couple of times a week, I also stream on Answers in Reason. Although haven't been doing as many recently due to illness and other commitments, but in generally that's twice a week. And on top of that, we've got to try and find time to actually spend time together as a family, and most of that will be at the weekend as well because they're still quite young, so they go to bed relatively early, and then the wife and I try and spend some time together if we can. This does mean that jobs, especially, the deep clean jobs like cleaning out the freezer, defrosting the freezer, get probably left a little bit longer than they would if we could do them, every week or two just to stay on top of it, because then they would be much quicker jobs. But that's why every now and then I have to spend a day or two doing a massive deep clean on everything just so that we can catch up. Now, I know as they get older, this will somewhat get easier. They'll be able to play with each other better. They'll keep themselves more amused. They won't necessarily always want to wake us up. They might wake up and sneak into the lounge and watch TV themselves rather than coming in and bouncing on our heads. These sorts of things do happen. It will improve over time, but it's still a challenge right now. And I do wish that we had a little bit support down here. We sort of moved because we had to, but one of the reasons for moving around here was lots of family who said they would sort of help out if they could, and that's been the if. In fact, some even promised to, but unfortunately we haven't had the support, and when we have asked for it, it's been generally a no and made out like it's a massive problem. So we've sort of given up asking for help around here. We also can't afford things like the nursery. I think it's July, she gets 15 hours of nursery free, but we can't afford to send her to nursery at the moment. And I think while she might need it, it's not feasible for us. And with the ongoing rising costs in the UK, I mean, my gas and electric bills and everything like that have gone through the roof. And, I'm really worried about how we're going to afford anything over the winter. Another thing that sometimes happens is my back goes whilst I'm doing these jobs or any other time. So when I was doing these jobs yesterday, my back actually went towards the end of it, and it was too painful for me to do anything. So I ended up having a tramadol. But they also have an SNRI effect as well. So by the time I'd cooked and eaten dinner, I started cleaning again because I was sort of back on that flex. But my focus isn't as strong with tramadol. In fact, it's a little bit more choppy. So it ended up with me being on my phone a bit more and the jobs sort of taking me longer, but I carried on cleaning. I was emptying out the drawers, cleaning their contents, so the cutlery drawer and the pots and pans and everything like that, because that needed to be done. And the end result is that yesterday I spent about 16 hours cleaning, excluding toilet breaks, cooking and eating one meal, and doing bedtime, so reading some stories. And I didn't even fall asleep with her that time because I was wired. So it was mental. And there you go. I obviously rambling on a little bit there. It's combined the example of Elvanse working with a bit of a vloggy post and some of the troubles that we're having. But anyway, I hope that sort of can give you an insight into one, like how Elvanse, how the ADHD medication can help you. Also, the fact that there are other factors in life that can throw you off. And when you're exhausted, your medication isn't necessarily going to be as effective. And if you don't have any medication, your brain isn't going to be as switched on anyway. So your ADHD symptoms or traits or whatever you want to call it, it does get worse when you're tired. You are less focused. You need to try and get that regular sleep, that good sleep and everything. And if there's all these things preventing you from getting it and you don't get a chance to catch up, things are going to be harder for you, even with the medication. And in fact, it can get to the point where the medication just doesn't really do anything except act as if it's a coffee and it sort of loses its effect. And so you need to try and find something that can resolve this issue. And I don't think right now there is much I can do. I just need to ride it out, let her get older, and see where we go from there.